The ordinary woman. Have you ever lived like a ghost in your own home? Well, today I'm going to tell you a story that might touch some wounds deep inside you, might make you confront your own silence. This isn't just Margaret Williams' story, it's the story of everyone who has ever been silenced. What you're about to hear will shock you. Are you ready? Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the like button. What if I told you about a 68-year-old Harvard graduate, a retired lawyer, who was turned into a shadow in her own home by her own son and daughter-in-law? Are you ready for all the striking details of a mother's silent battle to reclaim her dignity? Such a battle that began with whispers, continued with broken hearts, and finally erupted into such a cry that its echo shook the very foundation of a family, leaving nothing but wreckage behind. This is the story not just of a woman, but of a mother, a lawyer, and most importantly, a soul rebuilding herself. This is the rebellion of those condemned to invisibility, the silenced and the dismissed. And the price of this rebellion was far heavier than you could imagine. This was such a drama that it will reach the deepest corners of your heart. You won't be able to hold back your tears. This is an epic filled with pain and despair, pushing the boundaries of a mother's love and sacrifice, descending into the depths of the human soul. Robert's untimely death had left Margaret alone in that enormous house. For 3 years, that deep loneliness had drawn her into her shell, trapped her in her inner world. Every day, Robert's ghost wandered through every corner of that vast house, and every object whispered his memories. When she woke up in the morning, she would look for Robert's smiling face at the breakfast table, feeling the silence of those morning coffees they had shared. In his study, she would sit for hours beside Robert's unfinished books, feeling as if she could hear his breathing. In every page of those books lay his fingerprints, his wisdom, his dreams. When Margaret touched those books, she felt Robert's presence most deeply. But now, that room had become nothing more than a cemetery of memories. Every book on the shelves whispered of the past. Every frame cried out a memory. Margaret would stand in the middle of the room, running her fingers over the books, thinking about how mercilessly time flowed. Those dreams they had built together with Robert were now fading away one by one on dusty shelves, accompanied by loneliness and sorrow. With every breath, she searched for his scent. With every whisper, she hoped to hear his voice. But all that remained was emptiness, a deep, profound emptiness. The nights were the hardest. Wrapped in her blanket, eyes fixed on the ceiling, she would listen to the screams of silence. Every creak, every whisper, transformed into Robert's voice in her mind. Sleep was a luxury, a peace she could rarely catch. Even in her dreams, she searched for Robert's laughter, his touch, his presence. Even her own footsteps, echoing through every corner of the house, began to feel foreign to her, as if this house no longer belonged to her, but to the past and to loneliness. Even the ringing of the phone had become a luxury. Her connection to the outside world had been severed, and life's noise had given way to the echoes of her own inner voice. It was as if she were slowly being pulled into a swamp, sinking deeper each passing day. With every breath, she felt an indescribable weight in her chest, as if the entire world had collapsed upon her. A Harvard graduate who had won dozens of cases, a strong, independent woman, was now lost in her own home. All her dreams and hopes for the future, just like Robert's memories, had hidden behind a veil of mist. Sometimes she couldn't sleep until dawn, tossing and turning in her bed. She would look out the window, watching the emptiness within the darkness. Each passing day, she withdrew further into herself, hiding in a shell. Her eating habits had completely deteriorated. Her appetite was gone. Even her favorite foods no longer gave her pleasure. Her body had grown thin. The liveliness in her face had vanished. Dark circles had formed under her sunken eyes. When she looked in the mirror, she couldn't see the woman she knew. It was as if a tired, exhausted soul beyond even her years was reflected in the mirror. This withdrawal isolated Margaret more each passing day. Even when neighbors tried to visit, Margaret would politely turn them away. She wouldn't answer phones, wouldn't read emails. Her only social activity had become the occasional trip to the grocery store. Even there, she wouldn't speak to anyone, quickly doing her shopping and returning home. The house had become both her refuge and her prison. Within those four walls, she remained alone with her own memories, her own pain. There was nothing that could fill Robert's void. Her life energy was depleted. She had become a being who merely breathed in and out. The same questions constantly circled in her mind. Why me? Why did Robert leave? What will I do now? These questions had no answers, only an echoing emptiness. Her life was like a blank page with not even a single word to be written on it. Waking up in the mornings had become torture. Each new day felt heavier than the previous one. Even daylight seemed to illuminate only the dust in the house, not her. Days were endless hours. Nights were filled with nightmares. Margaret's soul was like being caught in the middle of a desert storm, each passing day becoming more covered with sand, disappearing bit by bit. This loneliness had embraced her so deeply that eve. But how could I have known that those few weeks would stretch into 8 months, maybe even longer, and that during this time I would become like an invisible servant in my own home? How could I have known that with this hospitality, one of life's most cruel games would begin? Jessica was the star of this game, and the script was written around erasing my life, my very existence. In that moment, with the pure instinct of motherhood, the decision I made lit the fuse for a series of tragic events that would deeply affect the rest of my life. Without knowing what the future would bring, I had opened my doors to them, and those doors opened not just to guests, but also to disappointment, injustice, and pain. That small glimmer of hope growing inside me would soon turn into a great shadow. With Jessica's arrival, the first change in the house showed itself in the kitchen. One morning when I woke up, I noticed that my 30-year-old faithful ceramic pot set had disappeared. Those pots weren't just vessels I cooked in. Countless family meals had been prepared in them, countless memories had accumulated. Each one had its own story. First meals with Robert, David's baby food, holiday feasts. Each one was a part of my past. They weren't just objects, but symbols of my presence in the kitchen, my motherhood, my role as a homemaker. When I asked Jessica about them, with an innocent expression on her face, she said, "They were so heavy, things that don't suit modern kitchens." The words, "but they were mine," were spilling from my lips when she cut me off, smiling and saying, "We bought new, lightweight sets, dear mother. It'll be better for you." I couldn't understand the true intention behind that smile at the time. Was this just a pot set, or was it the first step toward erasing my presence in the kitchen? With the loss of that pot set, it seemed like my soul in the kitchen had vanished too. Now that kitchen was beginning to belong to Jessica, not me. Every day, when I saw those new, modern pots, I felt a pang somewhere inside me. This wasn't just the loss of an object, but the destruction of part of my identity. A week later, while sipping my morning coffee, I overheard Jessica talking to her friend on the phone. Her tone was bubbly, as if she were the happiest person in the world. "Yes, my mother-in-law is here too. Of course she doesn't know anything, but she's great at cleaning." These words made the cup in my hand shake slightly. Coffee spilled over the rim. Did a Harvard Law Review published lawyer, a woman who had devoted years to legal science, a respected attorney, really not know anything? At that moment, an ice-cold wind blew through me. This wasn't just a slip of the tongue, it was the first clear sign of dismissing my intellectual existence, my identity. I didn't speak up. Maybe I was wrong, I thought. Maybe my exhaustion was making me paranoid. Maybe I had misunderstood. But that disturbing feeling growing inside me had already started eating away at me. On the other hand, the phrase, "great at cleaning," reduced all my achievements, all my education, all my accumulation to a broom. At that moment, I felt so humiliated, so insignificant. This wasn't just an insult, it was an attack on my entire being. The anger building inside me had knotted in my throat. But instead of coming out, that anger grew even larger inside me, consuming me. I couldn't believe myself. How could I be so helpless? Jessica's luxurious brunch party was the last straw for me. I had worked for hours in the kitchen, preparing everything perfectly. I had thoughtfully considered every detail, doing my absolute best so the guests would enjoy themselves. I had set the table with the finest china, applied my most special recipes. I had paid attention to the presentation of each dish, the position of each flower. David's old friends, Jessica's business partners, a crowded group had gathered. Everyone was laughing, chatting. Champagne was popping. Laughter was rising. But there, in the middle of that crowd, I had never felt so alone. No one was talking to me. No one was complimenting me. It was as if I were just another piece of kitchen equipment. Do you know what the reward for all my efforts was? When one of the guests pointed at me and asked, "Who is this elegant lady?" Jessica's answer pierced my heart like a knife. "Oh, that's David's mother. Such a sweet woman. Never went to university or anything, of course, but she's very good at housework." At that moment, it was as if all the lights in the world had gone out around me. Sounds became muffled. A Harvard graduate lawyer, a woman who had devoted years to her profession, won countless cases, a strong, independent woman. Had she never gone to university? And was my entire existence reduced to a woman who was very good at housework? My eyes filled with tears, but I didn't allow those tears to fall. There, in front of those guests, I felt so small, so insignificant. This wasn't just an insult. It was a blow delivered to my identity, my education, all my achievements. Such a deep wound had opened in my heart that even breathing became difficult. At that moment, I felt as if everything had ended. Margaret Williams had become a ghost, in her own home, by her own son's wife. That day, it was as if a piece of my soul had been torn away. Jessica's dominance in the house was growing day by day. After the kitchen, a renovation frenzy had begun that spread to the living room and then the entire house. Margaret's memory-filled furniture was being moved to storage one by one, on the grounds that it didn't suit Jessica's modern and airy taste. The hand-carved coffee table she had chosen with Robert, Margaret's great-grandmother's antique piano, all were old junk in Jessica. Tears welled in her eyes, but she held them back to avoid meeting Jessica's mocking glances. One day, while collecting the silver frames that held her favorite photos of Robert from his youth, Jessica had said, "Oh dear mother, let's get rid of these old-fashioned things. They don't suit the house at all. Besides, these pictures are so dark, it's like there's a funeral in the house." The pain inside Margaret had reached an unbearable level. Jessica's psychological pressure wasn't limited to household matters. She prevented Margaret from meeting with her friends, even listened to her phone conversations. Once, when an old friend of Margaret's called, Jessica had answered the phone and said, "Margaret is very busy right now. She doesn't want to talk to anyone," and hung up. Margaret couldn't believe what she had heard. Her connections with friends were one of the few things that helped her hold on to life. Now Jessica was trying to completely cut her off from the outside world. Margaret felt completely isolated, like a caged bird. The situation Margaret was experiencing was also affecting her physically. Insomnia, loss of appetite, stress, all of these were damaging Margaret's health. One morning when she woke up, her head was spinning, her vision was blurring. She tried to get up, but her legs couldn't support her. She fell from the edge of her bed to the floor. Jessica had heard the noise and came to the room. She saw Margaret on the floor but turned around and left without saying a word, as if she wasn't there. Hours later, when David returned from work, he found Margaret still on the floor. Her face was pale white. She was having trouble breathing. David panicked and took Margaret to the hospital. The doctor said that Margaret was experiencing severe stress and nutritional disorder, which had raised her blood pressure and caused her to faint. David was shocked by what he heard. He hadn't realized his mother was in such bad condition. When he looked at Jessica's face, he couldn't see any expression of remorse. At that moment, lightning flashed in David's eyes. While his mother was wasting away before his eyes, Jessica's indifference had deeply shaken David. This incident had opened David's eyes and allowed him to see Jessica's true face. But would David's regret be enough to compensate for the pain Margaret had suffered? David had noticed this change in his mother. He had begun to see the old light in his mother's eyes again. One evening, Margaret called David to her side and showed him Jessica's email. David was shocked by what he read. He hadn't realized that his mother, whom he had known for years, had suffered so much. His eyes filled with tears. He hugged his mother and said, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I never listened to you." Margaret felt David's sincerity, but she knew that things couldn't go back to the way they were. David's regret couldn't erase the pain that had been accumulating for years. Margaret looked at David for a long time. Years of exhaustion, disappointment, and maternal love were mixed in her gaze. "Son," she said. Her voice was soft but determined. "In this house, from now on, my past, my memories, and my existence must be respected. I am the owner of this house, not a servant. Your wife cannot control my life in my own home." David bowed his head. "You're right, Mom," he whispered. "I'll talk to Jessica." The next morning, David had a long conversation with Jessica. Their voices were loud. They were arguing. Margaret, in her room, could hear her heartbeat. Finally, a door slammed and Jessica left the house. David came to Margaret's room, exhausted. "Mom," he said, his eyes were red. "Jessica and I are separating. We can't stay in this house. When I learned what she did to you, I couldn't believe it. I'm so sorry, Mom." Margaret hugged David. Tears were streaming from her eyes. These were tears of pain and relief. Margaret's blog spread rapidly. Thousands of elderly people found their own stories in her story. They wrote her letters, called her, shared their own pain. It said that Margaret made one final addition to her will. She wrote, "Throughout my life, I gave everything to everyone. But when a mother gives everything, she becomes invisible. To avoid becoming invisible, sometimes one must leave." Years later, David read the news of Margaret's death in a small corner article in a newspaper. Harvard graduate, Margaret Williams, elderly rights advocate, has passed away. At the funeral, there were a few old friends, a few students, and an elderly woman she had met at the nursing home. David went there alone. Jessica hadn't come with him. When he stood by the coffin, he opened the envelope handed to him. It was his mother's last letter. "David, I never tried to be a bad mother to you. I was just too good a mother. Maybe too good. Sometimes the more a person gives of themselves, the more they disappear. I disappeared, but then I found myself again. Maybe for you to be able to hear your own voice one day, mine had to be lost. With love, Mom." That day, David thought about his mother's motherhood, not her life, for the first time. With that letter in his hand, his eyes looked into the darkness and this sentence poured from within. "Mom, I'm seeing you truly for the first time." Afterward, when he returned home, Jessica had filed for divorce. David's life had also taken a completely different path. He became a more sensitive, more understanding person toward others. He supported volunteer organizations that helped the elderly. He did everything he could to keep his mother's legacy alive. What do you think? Did Margaret forgive? Did David deserve to be forgiven?